very happy to see you all at the NAWA Roundtable. It's our professional education discussion with some prominent artists and educators. And the topic today is our writing, or we called it the written brush. Understanding the importance of writing for artists, and maybe giving you some tips and helping you to be a better writer at that. And before we start, my name is Elena Zelenina. I am the membership chair, and I am thrilled with our series, the Roundtable series. The flow of today's discussion will be, first I will start with some points about where we use the writing, maybe some points why it's still important, some of the things you will know already clearly. However, still imagine that all your knowledge you kind of forgot before you sat down in the computer, and you might have some new clicks, some new perspective. So just be relaxed. Some information might be old news, because we are seasoned artists for the most part. However, some new information, I promise, will be presented to you as well. I will then give the microphone to our PR chair, Mary Ahern, and she will add to the points that I made, and I'm sure will make them even more relevant. And then we are going to have an absolutely exciting interview with Fran Gardner, and that would be the flow. And then you will have the questions and answer part at the very end. And as always, if you have more questions and if you have suggestions for our roundtable discussions, which are supposed to be informal, relaxed, when everyone feels friendly and can ask questions and are encouraged to do so, you can also email, and we will address them either in the articles that our PR committee doing, or here at the round table, because it's the first year we're doing it. So as I said, today we're talking about writing and why writing matters for artists. So the first point that I wanted to bring up will be artistic expression is amplified quite often if we do give explanation and explain the thoughts, emotions, ideas behind our creations. There was the artist Marc Chagall, as you all know, who refused to give any explanations about his work, which is, of course, so it's possible to do that. However, if we think about our audience of people who look at our art, we are probably enriching them and building the connection between our artwork and them, and why and how it may be relevant to them. The second point, why even if you don't consider yourself a great writer, but writing itself, it's documentation of your process. So of your process, of your artistic journey, and it's like maybe even a diary, right? When you can look back and see how the growth was happening, what is relevant, what is not relevant. So it might be useful in that regard. We do need, of course, create artist statements constantly and portfolios. And here the only probably thing, I'm sure everyone knows what is an artist statement or portfolio. The thing that I have to remind myself all the time is that they have to be updated all the time. So artist statement is not something you wrote one time and even someone edited it or art critic helped you to develop it. It doesn't mean that several years later it's still the same because you changed. And right now life is so fast. So updating artist statements and portfolios and updating your writing style and how in depth you want to go into explaining something. And again, my personal was that discovery was that I understood that I really like sometimes to express painting descriptions in poetry, and they usually come out like very short poems, 2 sentences. I am 100% sure that if I wasn't writing, this part of me wouldn't have showed up like, oh, look, actually it's easier to say just in this 2 haiku style, Japanese style of poetry. So it's a lot of growth for me that happens through writing, but I will, we will wait for Fran to elaborate on all that. And where else? Well, social change, we have within NAWA, we have several artists who are very active in the society and their position on social issues is very strong. And so when you are an artist and you want to address something, so again, writing comes useful. Okay, so artist statements, portfolio descriptions. How about grants, applications, and proposals? We are not going to address it here. I think we should have a separate round table just about grant applications and proposals. But for now, just have in mind that all this preliminary work in a way with portfolios and statements with different descriptions, it actually comes helpful when we create grant applications. Social media online presence, we had a round table about that. For today, just I will add some tips on how you can incorporate your artist statements into your social media posts, because maybe Mary will help us understand that, because it's kind of branding, which means who you are as an artist is expressed through your art, but also through your narrative, through your statements, which should show up in the social media writing as well. And some artists really write a lot, some write very short paragraphs. It depends on the artist, the style, the love for written word. So that's, we'll give a tip for that. So, and of course, collaborations and networking, when you are describing the idea, that work that you did with your statement and process and portfolio descriptions, it's so much easier because you can just put it all together with a little different light on it. So tips for statements. I prepared 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so Okay, I prepared several. Let's just start with them. And Mary, once I'm done, if you feel free to elaborate on these ideas. So clarity and being concise. So that's one. So sometimes people do artist statements where they use overly complex language, and actually it was popular at one point, but right now I find the recommendations, maybe because it's a wider audience with social media, the recommendation is try to use the language that does not confuse readers. So, which sounds like isn't it obvious? But it's not, if you remember, especially artist statements from 20 years ago. I think being confusing and overly complicating was probably a trend at that time. So the inside, you definitely give an introduction where about you and your artistic approach. You do have to give a hint about artistic intent when your core concept about you and what stands behind your work. So it's easy for people to grasp what you are about, if it's at all possible to grasp. Process and techniques, definitely. Inspirations, and it's great because when you discuss the sources, whether they are personal or cultural influences, historical references, with some, let's say, with some of this reference, how they manifest in your work, that might be helping a lot. Your evolution, sometimes it depends on the length of the statement, how you arrived to where you are, but maybe it's more for a bio. We will ask Mary and Fran, maybe it's more for a bio. And there is a thing that you can actually express how you want the viewers to engage with your work. So would you like to invoke certain emotion in them? Do you want to start some kind of thinking, provoke a thought? Yeah, so that is a very good thing. Of course, you would consider the audience, right, for whom you are writing your statement, because although there are 8 billion people, every artist has their own audience, and it's much better to identify that group and speak to them. Versus just very broad, I'm doing that. So studying your audience or people, your collectors or people who get engaged with your art and speaking to them might create a more powerful writing, more powerful engagement, of course. And last thing I want to say about this is being genuine of who you are, because I think it also helps people to understand us better, because it's very hard to understand each other. We show only part of us, and there's so many assumptions about who we are, and people connect to us differently. So, but if you express yourself sincerely, authentically, I think it's easier for us, and it's easier for collectors and the audience, even the broad audience, even if it helps them to identify we're not their artist. it makes it the whole exchange, energy exchange better, I think, more pleasant. Okay, so Mary, would you be so kind and add anything on the importance of writing overall, or maybe specifically the statement part?
Hi. I like writing, and that helps. And you know, that does not. I didn't start off as a writer. I never considered myself a writer, but I found that I now like it, and that came because I was doing a number of different things as an artist. There are so many ways that you as an artist need to write. It's not just your statement, which is different than your bio, which is different than your resume. You also, from my experience, at the end of every workday in my studio, I have a journal, and I write what I worked on, what paints I used, what mediums I used, what area of a painting I might have done, and generally, how did I feel about that day? And that's a running journal. It's kind of like a diary of that artwork. I also write in the evening. I write at the end of the day a journal entry about what my day was like, and I don't spend a great deal of time on it. It's not great writing, but I do write about it because so much of my time is spent with art and also my garden. But it ties together, and it helps me to keep my thoughts going. The different types of writing. So that's when I do write. I write at the end of my studio day, and I write at the end of my work day. Those are different writings than writing my statement, writing my bio, or writing my resume. But all of them feed into each other. What I found, the more that I was doing this writing, was because they're all feeding into each other, I began to understand more of what my work meant to me. I began to better be able to articulate the messages that are embedded in my art. I happen to paint big flowers. You can see one of them behind me. They don't necessarily jump off the wall with a conversation. They impact you with color or something like that, and you're going to come with your own thoughts to it. But there's a whole world that's embedded in those paintings that I do. And my writing enables me to give voice to those messages and what's embedded in the paintings. It helps to clarify it for me, and it helps to clarify it where I write. Okay, where do I post? I post on social media. So because I have all of this content already, and I've got accumulated content from a variety of sources, I can post on social media every day. And I don't have to rethink everything. I can just grab material that I've already accumulated this material. I don't have to look at Instagram and say, oh, I need a sentence for this. I can just pull a full paragraph. I write blog posts. I have an art blog and I have a garden blog. Those help me to differentiate and to communicate to my audience how the garden impacts my artwork and how it feeds the conversation. I didn't really understand that until I started really writing a lot. And the writing helped me to investigate the sources of my ideas. I began to see a journey, which I was looking too close up to this one particular work. And by doing this practice of writing, I began to see the journey of the evolution of my work. It will help you understand the journey that you are on with your work. And eventually that might be included in your statement. It might be included in your social media. It might be included if you decide to do a blog. But that's all part and parcel of why you're putting down this writing. The writing is not always just for the public. It is also for yourself and for your renewal. I get to express to you what the work means to me. You bring your own ideas to it. You complete the painting, but I have put it out there and I have ideas too. So between what I'm thinking, what you're thinking, we come together. And I think that's an important thing. And it makes your work more accessible to your public. It makes your work begin the conversations with your public. You could write about the process. People love to see what goes on in artist studios. You could just be writing about that. You're taking it for granted, all the different things that you do. You paint, or how you set up your paint, or do you use a glass palette, or do you do this? Or are you watercolorist, or this? Don't take anything for granted. Write it for yourself, so you will also know why you're doing the things that you're doing. And that will translate in the variety of different ways, and the broad variety of different ways that you present your writing to the public. And as I said, I do blogs, but I also do a lot of interviews. I also do lectures. And so my content is there all the time, and that content changes. So it's not something I wrote 10 years ago. It's going to be the same thing I'm writing now. So by doing this daily exercise, which, believe me, takes 3 minutes at the end of the workday in the studio, and maybe 5-10 minutes at the end of the day when the lights are going out. So it's not a big time commitment. I'm not doing fine writing here. But that allows you to realize when you are making a shift in that art journey that you are on. It allows you to say, oh, I saw something today that I never did before, and I want to explore that. And then go back to that in 2 months later when you've gone through that journey, and now you have that to write about. So it's a way, writing is a way I find of finding yourself as well as communicating what you're doing to other people. Does anybody have any questions about that? I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to, because I want to hear what Fran has to say.
Yes, thank you so much, Mary. Now it's just the beginning of the discussion, because writing is like all topics so far that we discussed. They are our just first overview of this whole thing. But writing is at the core, because the better you understand it, right, then we go into our website, social media, emails, etc. And there are tools right now, Mary, maybe just if you can mention maybe simple tools that we can use to help ourselves. Grammarly is there, ChatGPT.
I was just going to say my savior is Grammarly, because I failed spelling. So I don't use AI, because every time I try AI on a paragraph I've written, it sounds like it was written from somebody else. And it was, and I like my voice. I want my voice to be heard. So I'll use Grammarly, because it will correct my spelling errors and, my tense, got the wrong tense in there. So you do want to be somewhat careful about that. You will have to determine whether you want AI reading your content. That might be good if somebody really, really hates writing. So that, that's how I'm approaching it. Before I put anything online, I never write directly onto my website. I write in Word, and I save it up in the cloud so that I can sit at my desktop, and then I can go in the living room and sit on my laptop and pull it there, because you're going to write differently at your desk than in your recliner. So, you need to see it in different places. So I always host everything up in the cloud so that I can look at it, a couple of hours or a couple of days later. And I never post something that I wrote the same day I wrote it, just because I'm a different person and I got different, maybe had a better cup of coffee or something like that. Something like that. And so then once I'm satisfied with it, then I can put it up online. But you need to not give yourself, not be feeling like you're going to be typing your stuff live. Give it some time to simmer, and make sure that by the end of what you're writing, it's what you really wanted to say. There are so many different styles of writing. You know, when you're doing an application like one of our shows, we have, please put down what this painting meant to you. So we ask you to write 1 or 2 sentences so that when we post it on social media, we know what you wanted that painting to say. And even that little bit of writing will help you. And if you'd written things at the end of your workday, you might already have that written. You know, what you write in your artist statement is, what does this mean to me, is going to be different than what is my bio? What is that history or that journey that I was doing, which is different than your CV or your resume, which is where did I show? And what, you know, what publications am I in, et cetera, et cetera. But you will have to make that determination in terms of AI. And but there are certainly a host of grammatical correction, but a Grammarly, I use it I have it in Microsoft Word, but I also use it on social media because it catches all my spelling errors before I hit post. And you don't want to be out there having things spelled incorrectly or having the wrong tense, which is another one of my big problems. So what else are you using, Elena?
Well, I'm like with ChatGPT, which is with AI.
Yeah.
You have to be careful because it makes stuff up sometimes, but not in this area.
Yeah.
But it can speed. I never use completely whatever the suggestions. I can go to Grammarly and then I change the whole thing. But if I am doing the writing like a fairy tale that I'm doing with art, or it's artist statement, yeah, I don't like the collaboration with AI. I don't think I understand it enough, and then you lose some kind of authentic voice, I guess, if you do that.
I think that's what I'm talking about, an authentic voice. I like that.
Yeah, but we still, like, having said that, it can be super useful and it can automate so much stuff. So maybe again, for one of our round tables, I would just exchange the ideas about different tools for business that we can be using, because whether it's email creation and topics or finding the right title, it can be like super stressful, but choosing the right title from a good description might be easy, and AI is fabulous for that. I mean, it's not going anywhere, so we might as well learn it, but it's yeah, it's one of the interesting tools. So I think we are ready to talk with Fran, who is the expert. Fran, are you ready for us?
Sure, I'm ready.
Thank you. So here is the thing. I wanted to ask you, like, how important writing is. If you can, one sentence, tell us how important it is, and then tell us a little bit about your amazing career, because I know you also even do retreats, right, for artists, where you actually help us unblock all this stuff and help us find our voice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to be with you today. And y'all have prefaced my talk extremely well. Between you, Elena, and Mary, y'all have hit a few points that I want to also hit on in my talk. So Elena sent me a few questions, and I'll start with her first question was how important. And she asked if I could do that in one sentence, and I can't. I'm sorry, no. I can't do that in one sentence. as professional artists, we are asked to write about our work in a number of different ways, and you have all mentioned several of those. Statements, biographies, for exhibitions, those are the kinds of writing we are asked for. Grant proposals and exhibit proposals, we are asked for writing. So we're writing to an external audience. We're writing for somebody else. There's another level of writing, and Mary hit on it very beautifully, and that's the writing that you do for yourself. Because writing can have an integral role in your artistic process and your creative process. This is your writing, what you're doing for you. And why would you want to do it? Let's say you're a person who doesn't really want to write. I'm not really interested. I don't want to do that. But here's why I think it is necessary. Writing can be a way to understand on a very deep level what you are making and why you are making it. When you get to know your work, writing about it becomes much less complicated, and even something that strengthens your creative process and your ability to express yourself when you are, say, you're giving a gallery talk or something like that. The more you know your work, the better you're going to be at that. The more you have written about your work, the better you're going to be at translating that into words that your audience can understand. So there's a reason to write for yourself in the ways that Mary mentioned. A few notes as you're making your art, just you're writing in response to what you're seeing on your studio wall. I think that's an excellent way to start this kind of engagement with writing. You know, artists say all the time, what do you write? Well, you just sit there and you start writing about what you just did. And as you become practiced at that, you'll begin to see your language change, and you'll begin to make discoveries about your work through that process. Writing about your art is a translation process. You're going from these thoughts and feelings that you have that you are expressing in a visual language, and you're translating that over into accurate words that tell another person who's reading that about what you're trying to do here, what your intention is with your work. And sometimes artists don't know what that intention is. In fact, I would say oftentimes they don't know what that intention is while they're making that work. It takes some time to process that and to think about that and to do that translation from visual image into written word so that the artists themselves understand what they're trying to do. So if you are going to work in a professional art world and we are going to strengthen our creativity in our individual studios, then writing about our work, when you look at it through that lens, is vital. And that's my answer, Elena. Do you want me to keep going with your questions, or do you want to ask the questions? And you're muted.
I'm doing that today. Fran, you can, but also, I mean, we can interrupt and I will ask you questions, so you can continue. It's an interview. These questions I thought we do right now would like to hear a little bit about your career, because you taught more than 30 years. It's not that you showed up yesterday and said, oh, I figured it all out. Right. Because our listening will perk up when we understand who we listen to.
Okay.
And after that, just speak on these topics. Okay. I think they're great questions, but you can edit them as you go.
Okay. And if anybody has questions, put them in the chat and I'll try to remember to look at that too.
Yes.
I did spend 32 years as a college art professor, and I worked mostly with freshmen and sophomores in studio and art history. I developed a lot of assignments, and I was always a strong believer as an educator that I needed to put those assignments in writing so that I understood what I wanted my students to learn. My students understood what I wanted them to learn, and so it could be very clearly defined, and we could move forward together to achieve whatever the assignment was. So simply writing those assignments out and trying to be as clear as possible really taught me a lot of importance about writing and writing about art and writing to an audience in particular. The assignments, I was always a big believer in that. So my assignments would always have a written component. So my art students would have to write about their work as they went through the process. And then at the end, when they were beginning to understand a little bit more about themselves as a visual artist or a person who was pursuing visual art and technique. So they were learning how to write more clearly about their work and their intentions. So they grew in their ability and I grew in mine through just writing assignments and fulfilling assignments. As a college professor, I also did research and wrote for conference presentations and grant proposals and other academic writing like articles and things like that. And those things have to be clear and concise. So that's another level of learning how to write for an audience. I found I loved writing art analysis. I loved doing analysis. I loved looking very deeply at works of art and gleaning the meaning that was on the surface, but also the levels of meaning in works of art. And I really wanted my students to enjoy that part of art too. So we did a lot of assignments around looking really carefully and closely, like a private investigator would look into a case. We would look into works of art like that. And then I would ask them to write their reactions to that. And then I would ask them to refine that writing. So in the course of understanding how meaning is formed in art, they were also learning how to translate their thoughts into words. So I found I loved that process too. I loved analysis, and that led me to writing art exhibition catalogs and reviews and things like that that have been published. I have written one full-length monograph, and I'm currently writing a book on creativity and artistic professional development. My deep interest in writing and helping others understand why it's important comes from my own experience. I got all the way through a BFA and never had to write a thing about my art, was never asked to write anything. I was asked to make the art, and I made the art, and I did that pretty well. But I was never asked to write a statement. I was never taught anything about how to write an artist statement. So for the years after I graduated, between my BFA and my MFA, there was 10-year difference. I was entering shows and getting, what we always get in a prospectus, right? Give us your statement. What's your statement about your work? And I shudder to think what I might have written there, because at that point, I really didn't understand how to do it or what they were asking for. So 10 years go by, I go into my MFA program when, in my very first semester, one of the very first things they asked me to do was write about my work. And I was just dumbfounded. I didn't know what I was doing. I was afraid I had gotten in over my head. I didn't know what to do. So I started this process of investigation a little more deeply around how is this done. And I read a lot of other people's statements, and I read some art writing, and I got a little more serious about reading analysis and reviews. That would have been that time, Elena, when they were using a lot of art speak, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to write that way. As I went through graduate school, I got a whole lot better at it because we did writing intensive work there. And when I finished and went back into my classroom, I realized that there was a real gap in teaching around that. Like, at the very least, let's teach our students how to write a statement or how to start with a statement. And so I became pretty serious about integrating that into the content of my classes. And I found that as I did that, I grew as an art writer, and I grew in confidence around expressing my own opinions around the work of others, but also, and maybe even most importantly, I learned how to translate what I was making into words that other people could understand. Now, why do you think is that necessary? Why is that necessary? Well, here's why. Because we put our work out into a world and we show it to a whole lot of people who do not have an art background. Most of the people that look at our work don't. Okay, let's just face it. If you put your work in a big exhibition somewhere, most of the people going through that gallery are not going to have had an art background. And they might have had an art background and still not, be 100% sure what they're doing in their own work. So that little bit of just opening the door for that person who may not have the art background enough to understand what they're seeing, just giving them a little bit of information gives them confidence, right? It gives them confidence in looking at your work. It makes them comfortable in asking questions about your work to you. Say you're giving a gallery talk and you've put your statement next to your work or in a binder and they've read that. Now they have a little bit more confidence to be able to ask that question in the open session, in the question answer period, where otherwise, they might have felt too uninformed to be able to formulate that question and ask it in public. So those types of writing become so important in your professional presentation of your work, but they're also so important in your artistic creativity and the development of your work, because the better you understand what you're doing, the better you're able to talk to somebody else about it. And then you get that little bit of understanding and communication that may be just enough for that person to say, well, I love what she had to say about her work. I think I'll buy it. Maybe it's that much help to them.
Yeah, Fran, it's so true. I was recently, actually, as recent as 3 days ago, I had a class and I was explaining some of the paintings that were work in progress. And I explained how I came from being just was expression of authenticity, strength, it's like inner strength, to transitioning to you're very authentic, but also everything is easy. So the painting kind of was showing that. And I saw completely different reaction just because I was using words that I myself discovered actually the day before that, but it changed perception, and the person immediately, that girl immediately said, oh my God, like this is my favorite. Oh, I can relate to it. And I don't think she would have felt that if that process and meaning behind was not conveyed. So it's like so true. So true. Do you have any specific, like, no, never do that, or yes, you can do that, ideas for us?
Yeah, I do. I understand that there are many artists who feel a sense of dread and pressure around writing. And that usually doesn't end well, right? If you are dreading something and you're putting pressure on yourself about it, you're very likely to procrastinate, and then you're under a deadline, and then you're looking at that section in the application that says your statement, and then you're like, oh, now I have to perform on command. That usually does not end well. That is, it can be very clear to the person on the other end of that application that you just really didn't want to do that part and you didn't take that part seriously. So if that is a grant application, for example, your work can be spectacular, but if you don't know how to talk about it, you don't know how to express yourself in words about your work, or you're doing that at the last minute under the gun, that's going to show. And when there's a limited amount of art money to give around, that can be the difference between you getting that grant and the other person getting that grant, the person who spent the time and did the work. So what does it mean to do the work? It means to practice and understand. One of the things that I want to take away when I teach writing is I want to take away that dread, that around that just pure anxiety around having to do that work. Now, I've worked with a lot of artists, and the vast majority really will say just right out, right, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this writing. I hate doing this writing. It's not something I want to do. They'll tell you that outright, the vast majority. Few people are like Mary Ahern, who just said right at the very beginning of her talk, she enjoys writing, okay? This is not hard for her because she's practiced. She's done this for a long time. And one of the things that she saw, and I have not worked with her, this is the first time I've heard her talk about this. One of the first things she saw was how important that writing was to her creativity, right? To the development of her studio work and to the understanding of why she's making what she's making. So the first thing I think is a no-no is to start backing off that feeling that just because you don't know how to do it now, that doesn't mean you don't know how to do it ever. It's like playing the piano or learning how to type. You got to practice and then you're going to get better at it. So that's the first kind of no-no, is to sort of, give yourself a break and understand that this is something that is a practice. And it's a practice that can greatly enhance your studio work. And that becomes writing for you, right? That becomes writing for you to grow and develop as an artist. If you do that, you're practicing the writing that you're going to be doing for somebody else later. So turn the whole thing around, and instead of doing the writing for somebody else, do it for you. Do it for your growth. I think that we make one of the no-nos, I would say, is that you need to understand the role that your writing plays in your professionalism and how your writing represents you when you're not there. It stands in for you. And think about that a minute. If you're not putting the words together and you're doing that hastily and through the lens of dread, that's going to show. That's going to be evident to the person looking at your work and reading your statement or reading whatever writing it is. It's going to be evident to the grant reviewer. It's going to be evident to the gallery, to the gallerist who's reading your proposal. So understanding the role that this writing plays in your professionalism, I think is pretty key. Understanding the kinds of writing that you're going to be asked to do by an external audience, I think is important. What is a statement? I teach that in my classes. What is a statement? How is that different than other things? Like, what's the difference between a bio and a statement? Should all that stuff be together? No, I don't think it should, but it can. There are various types of writing that we're asked to do, and understanding what they are and the difference between them, I think, is really important to separating your tasks. Like, what is a statement? What is a bio? What is your process? Separating all that stuff out can help you see more clearly, well, the statement you're writing about your intent. your underlying core motivation. Your bio, you're writing about what you've done and how you got there. And in your, what's the other one? Process, that's more about the materials you use and the way that you use them. So those are three very distinctly different things. And if any one of those things is more prominent, like if you're writing a statement and is only your bio, that is not a statement, right? That's a bio. Okay. So you have to, if you can separate those three types of writing and write distinctly different words for each of those processes, then I think that becomes clearer in how each of those pieces of writing is used when you submit that to an audience. Some good things, some practices that I think are good is, you know, just kind of what I just said, know the kinds of writing that artists are asked for. What's the difference between them? How are they used? Mary Ahern's wonderful advice on writing in your studio with your work in front of you on a regular basis. And that first time you do that, yeah, that's going to feel weird. You're going to be sitting there going, I don't know what I'm supposed to be writing about. Doesn't matter. Just write it. Just start writing the stuff. That will clear up. Would you agree, Mary?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. As you do that kind of writing, it becomes clear how to do that kind of writing. And that's when those little nuggets of meaning begin to appear. That's when you begin to see those little sparklers that come up and say, oh, wow, there's something about meaning in my work that I didn't even understand until I wrote this. That's the real joy of using writing, I think, is to really understand your work on those multiple levels of meaning. Let's see, what are other good practices?
I wanted to
understand that you're a translator, that you're a translator for your work, and many others need to see your perspective in order to relate to it. So those words become really important for the people who don't have the art background or might need a little help, right? They might need a little bit. You know, Marc Chagall, great, I love him. Would have loved to have seen what he had to say about his work, right? And historically, as Elena said, that can become really important as your work gets written about, that you had something to say about it. You're the best translator for your work. So realize that most people who see your work don't have that background and they need a little help to understand. So knowing how to open up that level of communication with your viewers can mean everything to achieving your artistic goals, both personally and professionally.
I wanted to get back to Elena's question about tools. Mm-hmm. You know, I left one out, and then Patrice added one in, was that she has recommended that we all go back to our Elements of Style by Strunk and White. And I said, I probably still have my copy from college. And she said, fine, take it out and read it. You know? So there's something, there's Grammarly. There's also the Gunning-Fogg Index, is that it will tell you at what level your writing is getting to. And, you know, if you're reaching a PhD scholar versus a high school scholar, that might help you understand how your writing is being, you know, is written for your different audiences. As Fran said, there's art speak, and there's grant writing speak, and then there's speak for non-artists that don't have the background. And so Gunning-Fogg, you put it through, you know, take your writing, it's an online, website. You can just go and put your writing through, and it will give you an analysis of your sentence length and the types of language and the words that you pick, which is going to help you understand where your audience, whether this work that you're writing is good for the particular audience that you're writing for at that moment, because you might be writing for a different audience. Do you have anything else that you use, Fran?
I'm sort of old school. I used, Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
I think a thesaurus can be your best friend if you know how to use it properly. A thesaurus is not just for substituting a big word for a small word, it's for finding the right word.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important tool. There are some tools out there like, I can probably give you a link afterwards, Elena, if you want to do a follow-up, but
Yeah.
they're like these emotional color wheels, sensory color wheels that are out there. Just Google sensory color wheel and you'll find a million of them. And I discovered these when I was teaching my college students who, I'd put a picture up on the screen and I'd ask for some sensory input and they'd say, the emotional range was pretty much happy and sad. I mean, they really did not want to delve very much past your basic responses. And so I found these emotional color wheels or sensory color wheels and gave all of them a copy of it. And so the middle of the color wheel divides it up into your basic responses. And then as you go out further in the pies of the color wheel, it gives you words that are related to that are more nuanced and have a deeper resonance. So those are kind of fun to play with when you're looking for sensory words around your work. I have never done AI. I don't even know what it really is other than, you put some stuff in there and it generates something for you. I'm scared of that tool for education, to tell you the truth. I just kind of feel like college student essays could turn into like just generic work.
It's easy to understand if something was written just by AI without human input. It's very clear that it's not authentic.
Yeah.
But I think it will. We just have to adapt because we're still humans.
All these tools have the potential for good and evil, right?
Exactly.
The internet, but great potential for good, but has been used for a lot of evil. So I think AI is the same kind of thing, that it has the potential for great good. I haven't explored that. And one of the things I like about the writing process and working with artists on writing about their work is the moment of discovery. And by that, I mean that moment that they understand that this is something within their grasp. Number one, they can do it. It's possible. They have the vocabulary. They already have the skills. They need a little bit of practice, but they can do it. And the most important thing is it teaches them something about their work and their motivation behind it. And that's the moment I'm looking for. And I don't think, at least, I don't know enough about AI. Maybe that moment we can get there with that. Yeah, but it's exactly that very personal moment of learning through the writing process that makes me very excited.
Yes, because and it's exactly that. You just nailed it. The point when we as human beings open up to our own who we are, our uniqueness, our individual self. And there's nothing like that treasure. And even AI might, if we don't meet the human might sound a little smarter than the real human, than we later meet. So if we do want to be our awesome, the very best self, AI is not a solution, but it is a good tool for people who already figured it out. Like when you use computer, if you know what program you want to create, then it's awesome. So it's a different conversation with the tools, how to keep as being unique and creative. But Fran, I really think like the retreats you do for artists would be fabulous. And okay, I have only last question. When you do these retreats, you probably combine several different artists, and everyone have their own process, right? How do you, like, because we're so different, but how do we arrive to our own unique point?
Well, my retreats are very individualized. I only take 10 people, maybe sometimes 12, depending on the venue, so that I have time to spend with everybody. And to be honest, you know, they're not all coming just to do writing. They're coming to deepen their work, to understand their work on more level, to get over a problem in their work, to seek help with some practice that they may be stuck on. So there's a lot of reasons why they come. All of those reasons can be addressed through the writing process. So I encourage writing continuously through my retreats, and help those that feel a little resistant to it. I give them ways to do it that, you know, it's not complicated, it's not complex. You don't have to sit behind a computer screen, you know, all that kind of stuff. My main goal is to help them understand that the art making and the writing process enhance each other. That if you're if we're doing these processes together, if you're a little resistant to writing, then, you know, in 5 minutes you're going to be painting again, so yay, right? So it's, you know, little bits, little pieces that we bite off at a time. I also kind of hide ways that we're writing into the retreat. So when I do critiques, we do a very I have a million of those that I developed as a college professor, but they all have one thing in common, and that is that we are looking at the work as it exists in that moment, without the artist's input, just the visual. And the critiquers, the people who are doing the critique, are writing those responses to that work. Instead of standing around and doing the, you know, sort of impromptu style, we do it in a much more formal way, and we write those responses. Here's the good thing: you're practicing how you're putting words together when you're responding to another person's work. And then at the end of the critique, when you present and discuss that work, everybody knows what they want to say. So there's not that sort of dead silence, you know, if people aren't sure what to say. And then all of those notes get handed to the artist. So the artist has something to take away with them that they can review later when they get home and see, you know, the rather in-depth notes that that their critique group provide for them. So they're like sort of embedded ways that I'm introducing the writing and the writing prompts in a way that makes the studio practice and the writing very cohesive. Like almost you can't separate it, right? That it has to be done in this way where you're having both the art process and the writing process entwined.
Yeah, it's kind of what Mary was describing. And that's my biggest takeaway, because I do have resistance. So for me, it's like, okay, writing is separate. This is separate. It's actually that cohesiveness is the goal. But let me ask, so does anyone have questions for Fran right now or to Mary? Yes, please go ahead. Please unmute yourself.
I unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Hi, my question is, and this is very superficial to what you're talking about. Some places say that an artist statement should be written in the third person. Do you agree?
I disagree.
Thank you. That's what
I
I
think the
thought.
artist statement is about the artist, and it's coming from the artist's voice, and it's impossible in a third person, you get that distance, right? So I think it should be the first person. But with that said, I think there are a lot of ways that you can get a lot of I's out of your statement so that you're not starting every sentence with, I did this, or I saw that, or I saw this. There are a lot of ways to write so that you minimize the constant, reflection on yourself using the word I.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, please. Jen, unmute.
Hi. One of the things that I do is I write poetry for and about my paintings and paint it in. Having seen a lot of artwork yourself, how common do you find that?
The poetry is embedded in the art.
Yes.
I see it a lot, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. To the degree that it's readable, that can vary. And then there are a lot of people who are writing, who are doing asemic writing. You might be familiar with that. If you aren't,
I don't know what that is.
it's
No.
a form of using mark making that suggests handwriting or suggests
Oh, yeah, I've
language
seen it. Yeah.
and isn't necessarily something readable. And that's an extremely poetic, very, very connected to a poetic device. But I see that quite often and think that the interplay, the overlap, like if you put a Venn diagram of poetry and art together, they overlap almost completely in artistic process and visual thinking and all those kind of things that we do as artists, writers, who are poets, do that same thing. So I think that art and poetry are almost like just two sides of the same coin. They do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Anyone else? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have questions. Okay.
I see
Well,
several people wrote over in the chat about a style guide. There's also a style guide that's for writing about art. And I can't remember the name of it right now. It's probably on this bookcase right behind me, but I didn't want to turn around and start going through my books. It's called something like How to Write About Art. It's a real easy title. It's been in print for at least 25, maybe 30 years. It's a real easy how to. It includes writing your statement. It includes writing bios. It includes how to write a review. I mean, it's just the bare bones of getting started. So if you are practiced in this, that's not your book. But if you're new and you really need some guidance, that's not a bad book to get started with.
wonderful.
It might just be like writing about art. I don't know. You'll probably be able to find it on Amazon easily.
Definitely. Okay. Let me check last time. Okay. Well, Fran, thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was wonderful.
Well,
Thank
I want to thank you for inviting me and gathering up such a great audience. Look at how many people came. This is wonderful. So I see there are people out there interested in writing. So
Yes.
I'm a NAWA member too. My contact information is on the website. So if you have follow-up questions or you want to talk, just send me an email.
Yes, yes, and we will continue because we will do the panelists on the side. We're working on that, so it's easy to find people who explain. So it's a very new benefit, but we are so beautifully developing it. It's gonna be awesome. It is awesome already. Fran, thank you. I hope to have you back for sure. Thank you all for coming.